Hello, SquawksHead here, returning with another instructional video on this Ka-50 attack helicopter. In this video I'd like to talk about the 2A42 cannon affixed to the starboard side of this attack platform. And in my previous video we looked at the Vickers, so it's only right that we look at another weapon system, and that's this imposing cannon that you can see deflected downwards that sends those 30mm rounds downrange. It's a really imposing gun, and we're going to talk a little bit more about its stats in a minute. But if you'd like to skip the details of this cannon and get straight into the cockpit, please jump forward and learn how to use it. But for those who want to know a little bit more about it, here we go. So this cannon was developed in the 1970s and it entered into service in the 1980s with the deployment of a new infantry vehicle known as the BMP-2. Due to the combat effectiveness of the BMP-2, the cannon was chosen to arm the Ka-50, providing further combat capabilities against ground and air targets. So that's why it joined the helicopter. So it's hydraulically supported, this cannon. It has two cartridge boxes, one in the rear, and in DCS that rear one houses 240 rounds of high explosive or high explosive incendiary rounds. In the front box we have 220 armour-piercing tracer rounds. The gun, as I said, is hydraulically driven, which allows the mount to deflect the gun to an azimuth of -2 degrees and 30 minutes to +9 degrees, and a larger deflection in elevation of -37 degrees to +3 degrees and 30 minutes. And we'll certainly see that when we fire it later, but you can see there it's deflected downwards, so there is some movement in this cannon. It has a selectable fire rate between a very rapid 550 to 600 rounds per minute and a slower setting being around about 350 rounds per minute. It has selectable burst lengths between 20 rounds and 10 rounds, 10 rounds on the short burst length setting and 20 rounds on the long and medium length settings. On paper, the effective range of the cannon is up to 1.5 kilometers or 1,500 meters against light armored targets, and up to 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers against unarmored targets. Also effective, it's effective against aircraft flying up to an altitude of 2,000 meters, and in DCS we can fire the cannon up to 3.9 kilometers or 3,900 meters, but that range has barely any accuracy, I can tell you, so it's best to keep it within the effective range. But it can fire, it will let you fire it up to 3.9 kilometers. Okay, that's a little bit about this fantastic cannon, and I think we should jump into the cockpit and start sending some rounds downrange. So here we are in the cockpit. You can see that we're in a hover, indicated by this square, which is a designated point beneath the aircraft, and this circle above it indicating the black shark. We're in a stable hover maintained by the autopilot in the aircraft. If you want to know how to get into a hover, please see a previous video that I released some time ago. Right, what do we need to deploy this cannon or the rounds downrange to some targets? Well, we need some targets, so just on the beach in the distance you might be able to see them. I've set up some infantry, some vehicles and so on. Now to operate the cannon we can do it in several ways. We're going to be using the Schwal today, so this is the TV system here that we'll be using to optically identify targets and fire the rounds. We'll also be using the helmet mounted sight a bit later on. Beneath that we have the weapon select panel. Now we're interested in a fair few switches here. The master arm, this one here, you can see that master arm is on. We've got the short, medium and long range burst length, so we know that short is 10 rounds, medium and long are 20. We have the high explosive incendiary ammunition selected. We can select this downwards to the armour piercing rounds. And we have low and high fire rates, so the high being up to 600 rounds per minute and the low being around about 350 rounds per minute. Above we have the display here. All we're really interested here is the right hand side. Now this depicts the number of rounds in tens. We've got high explosive ammunition selected, so we have 240 rounds of high explosive ammunition. If we move this down to the armor piercing, you can see we have 220 rounds. Okay, beneath that we have the, you can just about see it here, we've got the brightness control and the contrast control of the Shkval, and we might use that a bit later just to get a better image. Over on the left hand side by our left knee we have the navigation and targeting computer. Let's go through a few of these switches. So this is the training switch, we don't need to worry about that, we'll be using everything live today. The Kilo 041 switch is turning the, it basically refers to turning the system on. We do that at startup, that should really be on, there shouldn't really be any reason to turn that off, so that's on, which is a good thing. We've got the helmet mounted sight switch, which does what it says on the tin. We can select that upwards and get our helmet mounted sight, and we'll demonstrate how to use that later. We also have the auto tracking or the manual tracking switch. Now this is quite important for the cannon because in auto tracking mode the cannon's going to track where we point the Shkval. If it's in manual mode, the cannon is basically going to fix itself along the longitudinal axis of the aircraft and be bore sighted, really, just a fixed cannon. So we'll have auto tracking mode on. Now you see I've got the laser on there, we'll turn that off for the moment, but the laser we'll be using in this tutorial because we'll get all our range data from that and the cannon will know how to deploy those rounds at what elevation, etc. So we'll be switching that on later. Right, these buttons here. So we have the auto turn button, which, like in the Vickers tutorial, if we click that and we're in a hover, we will auto turn towards a target we've selected in the Shkval. We have a moving ground target button. What that does is it tells the computer that we are looking at a moving ground target, so expect movement basically. We're not going to worry about the AA, the air button, the airborne target button, or the AA head-on. These really, as I've discovered, are fusing buttons. These tell the Vickers particularly that they are to detonate via proximity rather than head-on, and we won't be using those. This knob here we want to keep in the move position. The fix will fix it along a bore sight, we don't need to worry about that. These really are if things go wrong. Manual mode will mean we manually have to point it, we won't get any ranging or azimuth compensation. The fail is basically for the navigation system to realign the INU, and vice versa with the navigation. We can use the navigation system to help the weapons system. Don't really need to worry about any of these, it's a bit confusing. All we need to make sure is that that's in move. So let's have a look at these targets then. So the first binding we probably need is the Uncage Shkval button. It's usually Uncage Shkval designate target button. Get that bound. I'm going to click that on the cyclic now. If you look up on the HUD, you'll see the circle indicates the bore sight of the Shkval, and we're going to use the Shkval slew buttons up, down, left and right to move it around. Again, we need to bind those. So looking down, we can see we're bringing the terrain into view, and there we go, there's our little party that we're going to upset in a minute. Now the Shkval has various zoom functions. It's got the narrow view, which is times 23 I believe, and the wide view of times 7. Those will need to be bound. So let's zoom in. There we go, we can see we've got some infantry, some vehicles, a few armoured cars and some nice explodey fuel tankers. Right, also what we need to do, we need to have bound the TV size button, which is again in the options. It's called TV target frame size increase and decrease. And what you can see here, when I decrease it or increase it, changes the box size. Now if we're going to be looking at some infantry, I suggest we need to go to probably our smallest setting. So we're going to decrease that. Okay, before we lock onto anything, let's talk about what we need on this weapons selection panel. We need the master arm on, which we've done. We also need to make sure we've got the settings that we want. In this case we'll use high explosive, we've got 240 rounds. We'll use a high rate of fire and in a 10 burst short round. We can alter the contrast here, which I can do. There's the brightness and there's the contrast, which helps us see our targets. And also, if we go over to the left here, we make sure we turn our laser on. Remember, this is a limited time on this. I still believe that's the case in the Black Shark 3. Basically, the laser can burn out if you leave it on too long, so be wary of that. The next thing we need bound is the gun select function. So the gun select function works like a safety. You've got gun select off and gun select on. And then, of course, the gun fire button. We need those bound as well. So we're going to turn gun on. And you'll see a C's come up there. And much like in the Vickers tutorial, the C indicates we're ready to fire. But before we do that, what we need to do is we need to have a look at locking up a target. And the way we do that is we slew the Schval over the target. So this guy here. And we're going to press the lock button. There we go. And you'll see there letters TA come up to say we're tracking a target, and the box is wobbling around a bit. Now, one of the things we can do is we can designate a point on the ground. So if we hold down the lock target button on the cyclic, move around to say the ground, let go, we've got a TR message. That tells us we are stabilized on a ground point. Below that, we've got the C indicating we can fire. We've also got a range of 2.4 kilometers. So let's go back, holding the lock button onto this poor chap here. So we go back to him there. There we go. We're locked on him at 2.5 kilometers. Now, if we just go back up to the HUD, we can just see a few things that we ought to talk about. Firstly, you'll see this rectangular box. Now, this represents the deflection limits of the cannon. So as long as we're within this box, usually we'll be able to fire. There are obviously limits, but this is telling us everything is good. It's saying we're locked on target. We've got the C. We've got this selected, so we can send some rounds down range. So let's have a look, see what happens. Here we go. We're going to deploy these rounds now. Now you'll see them go down. You see, there we go. We've caused a bit of a panic down on the ground, but we've taken that infantry person out. So let's do another one because this is quite good fun. I don't know why they're standing there, but maybe in the future they won't. Okay, we've locked again. The laser's telling us 2.5 kilometers, and we're going to send some rounds down range. Looking up, you can probably see the tracers going down. And there we go. Right, nice and easy. Now, if we turn on, you can see they're moving. If we turn on the auto turn and the ground moving target, what we can do, we can slew over, select, and if that infantry man moves, the Black Shark will point itself towards, which makes it much easier to deploy these rounds within the deflection range of the cannon. Okay, so let's turn this to a lower rate of fire, and you'll hear the difference when we fire this. Here we go. There you go. Much slower. In fact, I think it sounds a bit more imposing, actually. There we go. Look at that. We can also fire some armor-piercing rounds, so we'll do that now. Let's select lock target. Turn this to armor piercing. We've got 220 of those rounds, and let's do the same. Now you see we're at 2.5 kilometers, which is slightly outside the effective range. I said it can go up to 3.9 before it won't let you fire, but know that the further away the target, the less accurate it's going to be. And you can see there the rounds are dropping around. It's not quite on target. If we got to 2 kilometers, we'd be much more accurate. Okay, burst length. Let's turn this to high rate of fire, and let's change to a long burst length. So there we go, 20 rounds sent down, and we've ignited that armoured vehicle. Okay, right, let's talk about the helmet mounted sight. If we look over here, we can turn on the helmet mounted sight this way. So you'll see above we have a cross that's in our view, and what we can do, we can use the target or the uncaged Shval target designate button to change where the Shval's looking. So if, for instance, we notice some targets to our right, if I press the uncaged Shval or target designate button, we've got auto turn on, the aircraft will turn and the Shval will look at the area I've just designated. So let's go back. If we look over here, yeah, it's quite hard when I zoom in on this, but if we look here and I select that area, you watch. There we go, we're back to the combat zone. So that's a really good way of locating targets. Now, another way I found out of scanning for targets, it is quite manual. Unfortunately, it won't automatically log, but it's worth mentioning, is this. Let's turn off the helmet mounted sight. What we can do with the Shval, if we zoom in, we press the uncaged Shval button, what happens, once it's uncaged and we've got this view and we press the button again, it starts to slew left and right, and we can change the rate in a sort of scanning motion. So let's speed it up so you can see. Here we go, look at that. I mean, that's too fast. You're not going to spot anything at that speed, but you get the idea. You can actually use this Shval to scan, this system to scan targets, rather than have to keep slewing it using your hat switch or whatever. So that's something to note. Okay, let's bring us back on target. Here we go. Let's find one of these nice looking fuel tankers. Okay, we're going to go for high explosive incendiary ammo. Of course we are, because there's jet fuel on board. We're going to select the target, open up the safety, got the laser selected, press the lock button just to make sure, and we're going to send some rounds downrange. So this should cause some problems. There we go. So really nice and easy way to deploy the cannon at range. It's such a good sort of standoff weapon, this cannon. But we can use it obviously flying in. So I'm going to do that now. So to do that, what we need to do is we can press the reset button here. Reset everything back to nav. Turn the gun select switch off. You'll see that we're in hover, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to get out of hover and we're going to approach. I'll probably get shot down doing this, but here we go. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the cannon without arming the Shval and also without arming the laser. So turn the laser off, gun select on, and you'll see there we've got literally just a straight bore-sighted cannon. So we are going to have to do this manually. We're going to fly across. We've got 18 or 180 rounds. We're going to do short bursts of HE. And we're going to approach now. I'm probably going to get shot down here. But it's just to show you another way of deploying these rounds or sending these rounds to these targets. Here we go. Let's get some rounds down there. Here we go. There's another one. Another one. Okay. Yeah, we're taking some flak now. Okay. If we fly past. There we go. So we can also bore sight, which is a great way of getting close and intimidating your targets, if that's what you want to do. I have seen a lot of people doing a sort of circular motion around or orbiting their targets and firing, but it's quite hard to do because quite often you get out of the range of the range of deflection, so you've got to be careful of that when you're doing so. But there we have it. So the 30mm cannon. Let's see if we can find some moving targets before we end the video. There we go, there's those targets I was talking about. So let's go and have some fun with them. He says. Yeah, I need to work on my piloting skills, I think. Anyway. Intimidating weapon. So yeah, have some fun with it, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. It will probably be on the rockets, I should imagine. Certainly if there's no other releases between now and then. I am interested in looking at the Chinook. I'd like to get some videos out on a more recent release if possible. But if you like what you see, please click a like and subscribe if you want to see any more of my videos. Until then, have a good day, and I hope to catch you, as I say, in multiplayer sometime soon. Take care.